I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along as well. Uh, Wonderful, beautiful Wednesday. And I'm pleased to be in conversation with one of my partners, and that is W.D. Foster Graham. He's the book review uh, editor of Insight News and co-hosts book reviews with me here on the conversation on a regular basis. Also substitutes for me sometimes. Does a great job. A pleasure to be with him and to have him in conversation today. Today we're going to talk about his new book and when it's going to be available. Let me give you the background. First of all, WD, how you doing, brother? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Al. Great to be here one more time.
There we go. There we go. Well, I know in the course of this conversation, you're going to read part of your book, but let me set it up by sharing and reading the synopsis that you've provided. It's interesting look into the structure. The book is called To Thine Own Self, right? And the time is 2012. The place, Minneapolis. Daryl Edwards is the first grandchild of Elijah Edwards Sr., and he bears the legacy of the wealthy and powerful Edwards branch of the Christopher family, a family that sets standards rather than follows them. And in keeping with that legacy, he answers the call of the ministry, in spite of the attitude of peers viewing him as a spoiled, entitled trust fund kid, which was far from the truth. So recently widowed after 18 years of marriage to his beloved wife, he faces the challenges of raising three children and the ongoing responsibilities as a straight associate pastor of a predominantly LGBT church. But is he as straight as he thinks he is? That is the question. So Cesare Morelli Montgomery is the product of a modern family, deeply loved by his sister and his two fathers. His extended family is loving, but sometimes overbearing. Taking over his grandmother's successful practice as an adoption attorney, it's a labor of love for him to help create forever families in the LGBT community. His cat, Shazam, always keeps him on point, but why does he keep getting involved with men who don't share his own dream of love, marriage, and most importantly, children? Will Daryl be able to find room in his heart for a second chance at love with Caesar? You correct me in a minute. Will Caesar or Cesar accept the adage, be careful what you wish for, you may get it, and go for a man who not only belongs to his kids, but a congregation as well? Well, that intriguing indeed. Let's talk about that, WD. Uh, where does this book take us, first of all? And in your series of books, where does this fit in? Because you're covering this whole arena, this world of the LGBT community for individuals and for families and for community. So where are we going with this, and where does this come from?
Well, first of all, the book To Thine Own Self is the seventh novel in my Christopher family novel series.
Mm-hmm.
See, of course, the series itself centers around a large, wealthy, and powerful African American family. So we're going to get, stories about different members of that family. Now, the Edwards is just one of the branches of it. Now, the Edwards branch comes from old money. Now, this is a romance novel.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had historical fiction in the series, family sagas. I've also had a whodunit, and now I'm doing something I love writing, and that's romance.
What makes a novel a romance novel as opposed to, break out the distinction that allows one to call a piece a romance novel?
Well, the romance novel, you have two main characters that are involved. How they meet, how they interact, you know, are they or aren't they, and how they fall in love, you know, If there are challenges, there may be, there may not be in a romance novel. And in a romance novel, there is always a happily ever after.
Okay, all right. So it ends good, huh? Okay. So talk
Always
about
ends good.
the question I raised up is, where does this examination come from? It's a very, very, very large family, a very old family, a family with old money, but lots of elements. And this is one branch of the family that you're talking about. And again, I like the fact that you've taken on different elements of life, the whodunit element and the others that you described. And this one you choose to focus on romance, though I'm sure romance is in all of them. And I'm sure intrigue is in all of them. But there's an element of elevation, right? In particular stories that you tell in each of the pieces. And this one elevates the whole question of romance. And so when you set out to write this, what was your intention?
Well, my intention with this particular book comes from the fact that, first of all of my books have LGBT characters in them. And because I don't believe that representation it matters, and that's everything. As a young man, when back in our generation, back in the 70s, when I was looking at reading books that were written about African Americans, I was still seeing, wait a minute, there's nobody in here that looks like me.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the occasions where I did see them, I saw stereotypes. And as an author, I knew that that wasn't true. And it's about changing that narrative.
What were the stereotypes that you were concerned about broadly, and what stereotypes specifically regarding LGBT communities?
Well, the stereotypes period when it came to Black men
Mm-hmm.
were the following. Black men were portrayed as being down and out, broke, busted, and disgusted, in jail, on drugs, or dead. And I knew for a fact, looking at my own family history, that wasn't the whole truth, but that was what was being put out there. And because there are, and we've had many, many guests on our show that contradict that myth. When it came to LGBT characters, if we didn't see them, if I was reading on books, they were always, the villains, and that they're the negative type of stereotypes. That means that everything bad happened to them. They died at the end, and they were never happy. So those were, and when you got to Black LGBT, that was double the issue for me. So again, in the spirit of Toni Morrison, this is my favorite quote. If there is a story you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must be the one to write it. And so that's where I'm definitely going with these characters and stuff. And in this family, this being LGBT for them, it's just another fact of life. It's not a big deal. It's just who you are.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a question of the family itself identifying as a quote unquote LGBT family. It's just that's one of the characteristics of some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the people in the family sort of sit on all points on the spectrum of existence and humanity, is what I'm guessing.
That is correct. Like I said, it's an African American family that has LGBT family members in it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So then you obviously must challenge or tackle, if you're challenging stereotypes, the stereotypes we hold within the Black community, because, the whole church stereotype and the whole don't talk about it, but everybody knows stereotype. How do you address that? Do you address those specifically and particularly?
Well, I address those to a certain extent, so far as the Black church, because that's what I grew up with. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we know, but we don't talk about it. Or in the church says, we will use your time, your money, and your talents as long as you stay invisible.
Mm-hmm.
So in this book about To Thine Own Self, you see him, he's a quote straight pastor of an LGBT church. But I also address that in that this church of origin is also a supportive, inclusive church, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about in worship. They say that you are valued and respected as your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I would like to bring up regarding Reverend Edwards is this. Um, I was reading different stories that were designed for LGBT, and too often Black pastors were the villains.
Mm-hmm.
And because you think like villains, like the homophobia and
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. So for this book, I wanted to portray Reverend Evans as a protagonist as he's discovering things about himself. And rather than running from them, he's embracing those changes. Because, when it came to persons who are bisexual,
Mm-hmm.
no, since sexuality is so fluid, there is a person could probably be married to a woman for years and years and years because he loves her, he's so focused on her, and never recognized that he's bi,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's always been there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that come about with this novel, To Thine Own Self, because it's all about Black love. I've always been an advocate of Black love, whether that's male, 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 female, female, female. I love all the forms it's there, and so I love the sweet, something that's sweet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Too often off. Now, I granted there are the elements we're talking about, our struggles as African Americans, and I do not discount those in any way.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I want to show, I can show something that's sweet, heat, heart, and humor, because that's also our strength as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me go from there to the contemporary news and have you react or respond or not. What's hot in the news right now is the stories on what's the rapper P Diddy, and how the allegations are that he was a kind of a really horrible human being and manipulative and forced himself on young artists, young people that were looking to move into the industry, but because he had power, he would be acting as a predator and involve young men and young women in his sexual escapades. This is all alleged, but it's buzzing on the internet and social media right now. And so, when you see that story emerge, how does that register with you as an indication of where the public is right now on the question of LGBT and the question of um, of sexual abuse? Because they don't have to go hand in hand. They don't go hand in hand, but we too often conflate them, I think, and we don't recognize that each is again, a human possibility that are not necessarily joined, but the same things that can happen anywhere else can happen in these relationships as well. As you're listening to social media, if you are, what are you feeling and what are you observing about that particular issue of the mass media, the social media, and the hype entertainment industry that is putting a focus on from R. Kelly to P. Diddy and to now, I guess, what's his name? Beyonce's husband is getting caught up in all of this. What are you hearing? What's the buzz on the street?
Well, those are excellent questions, Al. Now, for me, so far as social media, and for reasons that you already know, I've been staying off it most of the time. But
Ah,
hearing about this, it does sadden me because because of the fact that when you're talking about sexual predators, no. So for far too long, that was the stereotype of persons who were LGBT, that you were a predator, you were a pedophile, and things like that weren't true. Now, granted, the persons are out there,
mhm,
and no, that's behavior. is not excusable. Especially you're using your power to manipulate or force someone to do what they don't want to do. That's wrong. And say, but yeah, all these things are really separate separate matters in and of themselves. So far as a I say as someone who is LGBT, that's what I see. I said, what are you trying to turn back the clock here? Because you can think of all this progress and steps that we made over the years, especially being both Black and LGBT. But when media is creating this narrative, no, it's up to those of us to speak out about it, or say to speak truth to that power, because what you're doing is when you're focusing on that, that's what's getting the attention. That's what's getting the energy. And the people who are making positive changes aren't getting that attention, and that's what they deserve.
So the next part of this story is the set of allegations that bring Bishop T.D. Jakes into question about his relationship with P. Diddy. And again, this is all allegations, all social media. People should always be forewarned and be aware that allegations are simply that, speculation, all of it, much of it ill-intended, ill-conceived, so but you kind of get what you get. But it's out there, and it's now, one of the, it's currency in the marketplace at the moment. So my question becomes, as you see that evolve, how much is art imitating life or life imitating art? Because you're writing about the church, you're writing about an LBT church, and writing about a person who is involved in the community, who identifies as straight, but who is apparently open enough to question himself and sort of examine his own identity in ways that he hadn't before, that he presumed, didn't need examination, but he goes through a process. So the question is, how much of the stuff we see in social media, in community, is showing up in your stories, in this novel in particular, and what are your comments about that? Because I'm thinking that you probably, things that you're writing probably are happening almost real time in the community. Not everything, but some of it is. What do you think?
Well, my take is, because I usually don't write about social media. I tend to write about what's in that particular universe, because what the things that we write, what they already exist out there, and no matter what it is you write, that's where that energy is, that creative energy is. So, it probably wouldn't surprise me when it comes to when I'm writing about this, because I usually write like in a positive way. Someone's out there that's actually living it.
Yeah.
And I could say that because I've had readers come to me and say, hey, I know somebody like that, or I have a relative like that. I have a friend like that. So that's affirmation that, and no, I'm not thinking about that actually when I'm writing. I'm thinking about, okay, write the stories you want to read. But now, if social media continually puts that out there, what goes around comes around. So it's true. They're just allegations, and basically you're saying guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
It has been the thing, and again, that saddens me, because suddenly, in social media, you've been tried, you've been convicted, and you've been sentenced, and it can be totally wrong.
And wrong-headed. Well, I think, again, that's kind of why what you say, WD, is so important, and what you do is so important, because you're approaching a realm of human experience with a positive mind, and you're examining, as you described, your notion of what the romance novel genre is. You're examining a happy ending, right? How
That's
things
right.
work out. And you're saying that, in every element of life, one way or the other, things work out, even though there's pain, and even though there's loss, and even though there may be disaster. At the end of the day, in the arc of our existence as human beings, things will work out. And that is a cause for hope, and it's a cause for recognition of our shared humanity and for the idea that we all deserve grace, right? And that
That's
we
right.
all have potential to be and become and evolve into our best selves as human beings. Well, let's go into your book. The name, obviously, To Thine Own Self. Uh, Everybody knows what the last two words are, but why did you choose? I love what you chose it as a name. Why did you do
Well, thanks for asking that, Al. I knew this would come up in the course of our conversation. But yeah, to thine own self, it comes from the phrase we all know, to thine own self be true. And so for my character of Daryl Edwards, that's what he is learning in his process. And he does learn to be true to himself as in terms of his character, his faith, and embracing, yeah, this is a part of who I am. And he says in later on in the story, when he tells his congregation, yeah, God doesn't make mistakes. And so he is going through the process, and then he reaches this level of honesty, especially when it comes to his children, because he comes out to his children, and of course one of his children is gay, and he's to thine own self be true. It's about living an authentic life, and that includes when he falls in love, and that he has a second chance.
it? To talk about those relationships, what happens when he comes out to his family, his children? What is his experience? What happens?
Well, given that his children grew up in this LGBT church, their question to him was first, like, did you cheat on Ma? And he is reassured that no, I didn't. He loved his late wife. He never would have hurt her. He has a moral code that, yeah, just because I buy doesn't mean I cheat.
Mm,
And with that, no, they embrace it. Okay, well, we love you, Daddy.
mhm.
And he also is recognized for himself that they probably wouldn't have accepted another woman in their lives because of the relationship with their mother as
Mhm.
they would accepted a man in his life.
Mhm. What was the setup for him being pastor of an LGBT church?
Okay, well, the setup was he, well, after he was in college, he felt the call to the ministry. Now, the family business is investments, financial whiz. And so, again, he has a very wealthy family. However, for him, he felt the call of the ministry. And of course, um, his family supported him. And of course, uh, because his name, people assume, oh, this is just a spoiled trust fund kid. They're not going to go anywhere. You're going to lose interest. But with Edwards's, one, they protect what's theirs. Two, they bite the bullet. Two, they know you never know what hand can be dealt. And they have a commitment to public service. So that's how he got into the ministry. And when the call came for him to be associate pastor at this light of the world LGBT church, he didn't question it. He answered the call. And
Let's
that's
talk
how he
about
got
the
in.
call. How did the call originate to him? And maybe that's not in the book. Maybe it's not, but you must know the story. So how did it so happen that he got that call?
Well, the thing is, no, it's not in the story. But when you answer a call, when God calls you to mentor, he answers because of his prayer life. So that's something that comes from within.
So my question is, how did the church choose him? Not in the book, but what if I have to ask you, how did they choose him? How did that happen? How was he
Well,
known to the church and
well,
therefore invited?
well, the Edwards family name carries a lot of weight in the Twin Cities. So the church knows, and not only knows about him, know about his family.
Uh,
This family sets standards. They don't follow them. So they know that, yeah, this is an Edwards here. And
mhm,
and they also know they're LGBT members in the Edwards family.
Mhm.
So that's part of the act of
Likely
how
not
the
a
church chose him.
homophobic centered uh, person or family.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, they have a zero tolerance level for discrimination,
Mhm.
homophobia, those things.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. And so, why don't you take a minute? In fact, let's do a station break for a second, or a commercial, not commercial, but a spot for a sponsor. And then when we come back, I'll have you read an excerpt that you've chosen. It'd be fun to hear that, and I have more questions for you. Thank you
Okay.
for writing the book, number one. Thank you for sharing it, and I, as always, enjoying this conversation with you, W.D. Foster Graham. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll be right back in a couple of seconds. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. Good information. Okay. So I'm back with W.D. Foster Graham. W.D. is the book review editor for Insight News. He's co-host with me on the conversation. We do our book reviews, talking to authors near and far about their work, their vision, their products, and about publishing, about books, about literacy, etc. And he's got a new book out. The book is called To Thine Own Self. He'll talk about when it's going to be available, but I wanted you, WD, to take a minute and share an excerpt from the book. So go ahead and go for it. Set it
Okay,
up. Set it
I'm
up.
most happy to. Now, as the story begins in 2012, and this is when Daryl meets Cesare. Now, he is the other main character. Now, Cesare Morelli Montgomery, again, he is a biracial African on one side, Italian on the other side. And as you mentioned, synopsis, he is an adoption attorney. So we're coming to October, and Cesare is at a finalization hearing down at the Family Justice Center in downtown Minneapolis to unite a forever family. Oh, and just to answer one other question you asked earlier about how Daryl's family responded when it came out, their response is, okay, now tell us something we don't know. And,
Okay.
and to keep on stepping.
Okay. All right.
So what we're going to share is uh, October 8, 2012 at the Family Justice Center. At a finalization hearing, nervous anticipation was both expected and normal. Martise was seated between Tyson and the Gordons, coloring in a coloring book. Jayla was entertaining Mr. and Mrs. Banks with a toy cell phone. In the tradition of little black girls everywhere, her hair was neatly braided and oiled. Not surprisingly, both were dressed in their Sunday best. Hi, everyone, Cesare greeted them. We're second on the docket. While we're in there, I'll ask you a few questions. The judge will ask you a few questions. The decree is finalized, and then we take pictures. He focused on the adoptive parents. You waited a long time for Martise and Jayla to be yours, and very soon they will be. Amen to our new grandbabies, Mrs. Gordon declared to the assent of all. Now, you said your pastor would be here. They're going to be calling us in soon. Well, Pastor Marie was called out of town, but Pastor Darrell is on his way. He should be here any minute. Oliver gave Jayla her favorite stuffed bear to occupy her and ensure her sitting still. At that moment, Tyson looked down the hall. Hey, here he comes now. Cesare's heart nearly stopped. Striding toward the group, dressed in a conservative blue suit, topcoat, and clerical collar, was the hottest brother he had ever seen, and he had certainly seen his share. Where has this man been? His stature alone would guarantee standing out wherever he went. Was there some statute somewhere against a man looking that good, and a man of the cloth, no less? Cesare hoped he could maintain his professional composure even as the building temperature rose. Pastor Darrell, I'd like you to meet Cesare Morelli Montgomery, our attorney, Tyson said. Cesare, this is our associate pastor light of the world, Reverend Darrell Edwards. At 6'4", Cesare rarely looked up at someone. Up close, Pastor Darrell had 3 inches on him, and his broad shoulders and mature muscular frame carried it so well. The hints of gray in his dark brown, short-cropped natural hair and his well-trimmed beard, coupled with his demeanor, told Cesare the brother was older, possibly late 30s or early 40s. Khadijah might be right. Maybe my picker has been off. It's a pleasure to meet you, Cesare. Pastor Darrell extended his hand with a pleasant smile. Tyson and Oliver had kept the faith that this day would come to pass. I thank you for being part of the process. You're welcome, Pastor Darrell. And it's good to meet you. Cesare accepted his hand, sensing the heat surging through his body with the contact. His legal skill at reading people swore something in Darrell's eyes responded to their clasped hands, but now was not the time to explore it. After greetings were exchanged all around, Pastor Darrell took an available seat. I'm happy and honored to be a part of this special day. To me, family is everything. I don't know what I'd do without my kids. Really? Cesare did his level best to conceal his surprise. Yes, I have 3. That's what I need right now, being attracted to a married straight dude, Cesare groaned inwardly. This is a recipe for disaster. They are so much more trouble than they're worth. I imagine they can be a handful sometimes. I know my nephews are. Sometimes, Pastor Darrell acknowledged, but they have been a comfort to me since my wife died, and with God's help, I've been able to be strong for them. What? Wait a minute. This man's going through something painful. He's a widower. How can I be so selfish? I'm sorry, Pastor Darrell. Losing someone you love is never easy. No, it isn't. All I can do is remember her life, be there for my kids, and go on. But thank you for your concern, Cesare. Anytime. Cesare broke their eye contact when he looked off in the direction of the courtroom doors. Looks like it's time. Come on, everybody. Compared to the time-consuming process of getting to that point, the finalization hearing itself was short. The joyful group pictures taken at the end, on the other hand, were well worth it. Tyson and Oliver insisted that he and Pastor Darrell be part of the photos. Caught up in the moment, they were more than happy to oblige. Once outside the courtroom, after Pastor Darrell said a prayer blessing over the new family, Oliver turned to him. Now, to celebrate this momentous day in our lives, Pastor Darrell, we'd love to treat you to brunch, unless you have an appointment. No, Oliver, I'd be happy to. Oh, that means you too, Cesare, Tyson beamed. Thank you. I'd love to. All through brunch, Darrell had a hard time keeping his eyes off Cesare. Feelings he hadn't experienced in nearly a year surfaced. Judging by the ease of the interactions he observed with the family, Cesare was clearly someone who cared about others, especially children, from the way they smiled and engaged with him about their favorite cartoons and toys. His commitment to creating families touched something in Darrell's spirit. And then there were the dimples that came out whenever Cesare smiled. This has been a beautiful celebration, Oliver, Tyson. You already know that being a parent is the toughest job there is, but it's also the most rewarding. Darrell faced the newly minted grandparents. And God has blessed your children with 4 grandparents who will be an active part of your village. Thank you, Pastor Darrell, Oliver said after hugs were exchanged. We'll see you on Sunday, and we'll make sure Pastor Marie and First Lady Charmaine get copies of the pictures. While the family boarded the elevator to take them to the street level of the Nicollet Mall, Pastor Darrell turned to Cesare. It was a pleasure to meet you, Cesare, and I appreciate all you've done for Oliver and Tyson. You have been a blessing to so many families, making such a wonderful difference in their lives. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a business card, carefully choosing his words. I hope we meet again. Cesare accepted the card, placing it in his wallet before he took out one of his own business cards and handed it to Pastor Darrell. There was no mistaking the current between their clasped hands this time, nor the slight darkening in Cesare's eyes. A strange fluttering touched the pastor's heart. Cesare beamed. Likewise, Pastor Darrell. I look forward to it. Please, just call me Darrell. All right, Darrell. Cesare gave him a friendly smile and walked away. Watching him go, Daryl contemplated the warmth that spread through his body from the confident way that brother walked.
Boy. Okay, all right. Well, that's a good story, man, and how well you tell the story. So, as you hear yourself reading that out loud, what are you thinking? Let me say that you masterfully walk the audience through the change of people with the voices and the change from actual dialogue to somebody's thoughts. And it was clear that you were portraying and presenting the person's thoughts in a kind of soliloquy of sorts outside of the ongoing interaction. I thought that was great. Well done. And obviously, it comes across the page that way too. What are you thinking as you hear your voice as you're reading?
I'm thinking in a romance, usually the big question is, how do these two people meet? What
Hmm.
kind of chemistry is going on? What's being spoken? What's being unspoken?
Hmm.
And so, because you can meet in all kinds of places, you never know. There's never one place where you can. And although I'm sure, no, and it was just sheer, you might say it was an accident that the senior pastor couldn't be there and the
Hmm.
associate pastor was there. But in a sense, there are no accidents.
Everything is in divine order, as they say, and this
Exactly.
is an evidence of that. Now, the ceremony, I'm sure I understood it. Oliver and
Tyson.
Tyson are adopting.
Yeah, they're adopting two children.
Okay, and that's a gay men couple, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's the context, and that's why they're members of the church, which is LGBT. So it's kind of like everybody here is woke, and aware, and none of us have any challenges or problems. And the pastor comes in, uh, having lived his life where he has lived, but also discovering something about himself, hence the title, To Thine Own Self. Good story, man. Good story. So
Thank
let
you.
me ask you this: does a book like this, is it a steamy book or not? Steamy might not be the right word. You tell me if it's the right word or not. Uh, how far do you go in describing relationships between people that are in love or that are encountering each other in your book? And I'm not sure if there's a formula or if there are gradations that different authors bring to how they tackle relationships between individuals. But how would you describe yours?
Well, trust and believe. There's plenty of steam.
Okay.
There is plenty of steam. Um, when at the same time when I write a romance novel, it's also there's a element of being sweet as well
Hmm.
in it. So I incorporate the two, and especially when since we're talking about let's see, he's a pastor.
Hmm.
I know there. No, I incorporate a certain ways that he approaches passion, and then also Cesare on the other hand, coming from Modern Family, they each have different ways of doing that. And so also the reality is the fact that one, he's part of a congregation, so he's always going to be set apart in a certain way
Hmm.
as well. And Cesare has to learn that yes, he belongs to a congregation, but he also is a father. He has three children. How are they going to blend this family? So those all come into play. But yes, there's love and there's passion and definitely feel good.
So all of this yeah, assembled in your head and presented on paper, but the assembly comes from observation. So talk about the source material, uh, the story in your life that gives you the authority to examine, to write, and to talk about the options and possibilities that you think are all around us all the time, but too often either hidden or or ignored because of convention, right? and
Mhm.
because of stereotypes, we talked about that earlier. But uh, I don't want you to name anybody's name, but how close does this come to the people that you interacted with and watched in the setting? I love that you're talking about being downtown on Nicollet. That makes it real seeable, right? Real visual to the reader here. So, how close does what's the source material for these ideas, the images, and the characters?
Well, resource wise, no, I actually had a chance to talk with an LGBT senior pastor to so far as to bring authenticity to my character as Daryl Edwards,
Mhm.
and what his process was so far as going to seminary, some of the pastoral matters that he dealt with, and of course the fact that he and his husband had been married for 27 years. So my source material are people who have long-term relationships and marriages, and probably not just here in Minneapolis, but different couples I've met along the way who are living their truth, and also those who have children. And say for me, yes, me and my husband have been married for 13 years, and and then we have, and there we have our son,
Mhm.
and so these are
Is your
things
son
that.
adopted, or your son or
Yes,
his son adopted a son?
mine, mine.
Okay.
So when my son and I came as a package deal,
Ah,
when I met my husband.
so hold it. So your son was adopted, or he's actually your actual biological
Yeah,
son?
he was
Biological
adopted.
son. Adopted. You adopted.
Yeah.
When did you adopt? You mind talking about personal?
Well, he literally came to me from the hospital.
Okay. How did that happen? If you don't
Well,
mind me asking, though, I'm just being curious. I'm a reporter, so you can tell me to
yeah,
stop asking questions anytime you want to.
yeah.
But tell me about
No,
that.
no, he it came through foster, then came as foster care, and then to adopt. So, and
How did you find yourself as a candidate for foster care and adoption? How did that happen in your life?
well, the thing about it is, if you know something about what the adoption food chain is,
Mm,
one word is at the top of the food chain are white infants. At the bottom of the food chain are African Americans, babies, and teenagers,
mhm.
and in some states, biracial children are at the very bottom. I don't
Really?
ask me why, but they
Mm,
are.
mhm.
And so and so I was in the unique position of, hey, being an African American adoptive parent. So, and I was ready to take on, and of course, I wanted to start from scratch, and
Mhm.
that terms, yeah, literally a baby.
Mhm.
And
Had you already been self-identified as a gay man at that time when you became an adoptive parent, or
at the time,
how long have you been identified and presenting yourself in the world as a gay man?
oh, I was out when I was a teenager.
Okay.
So that's long. Now, granted, I've been aware of it long before then,
Hmm.
but actually being out, well, suffice it to say, I was outed by the military back in the days of Vietnam.
Okay. Tell me about that if you don't mind.
Well, as you know, during Vietnam, we had the draft lottery,
Hmm.
and we had a lot of people that that hey, wasn't declared a war.
Hmm.
I had a father in the military who was a lifetime military man
Hmm.
who told me, yeah, rather than send his sons to be cannon fodder, he was ready to send us across the border into Canada.
Wow.
So at that time, I was in college, and he suggested, okay, why not, do the Air National Guard? That way, you could do 1 week in a month, and then you just do your summer duty, and then you can still be there in college.
Hmm.
So when I was 18, I said, okay, okay, this sounds like a good idea. I went down to the place where they did the physical. And so on that, I passed everything else, but on that physical, there was a certain question. It's no longer there now. They're asking, are you or aren't you?
Mhm.
And so when the person that was conducting the physical asked me, well, my attitude was, now I just kind of come out. This is 1970. The first Pride marches are there, and
Mhm.
I'm on a college campus as a
Mhm.
Black student.
Mhm.
And they said, if well, why didn't you check this box? Well, he said, well, if I do check it, you're not going to let me in. If I don't check it, and if I'm not lying about it, you're going to put me out. So I finally said, F it, and checked the box.
Mhm.
Of course, I thought all this was confidential. I
Mhm.
was wrong. This was on the base where my father worked.
Mhm.
So before spring break, when I was going to tell my parents, my father told me, there's something that came up on your physical we need to talk about. And I'm thinking, oh,
Mhm.
so that's what happened with the military.
Mhm.
Funny thing was,
What city were you in? Where'd you grow up at?
here, I'm a
Oh, here's
native of
one
South
city. Okay.
Minneapolis.
Okay. Okay. So he was at
So
the base out there at Fort Snelling, or out there at Fort Snelling,
at
or at the
the
airport?
Air National Guard base
Okay.
out
Okay.
there.
Okay.
So what happened was 5 months later, I get a call from one of the officers that's at the base and said, "Well, we want you back." And now I'm looking at it and said, I was skeptical, excuse me, you kicked me out because I checked the box. Now you want me back. I
Mhm.
said, and I'm asking you why. I'm not jumping at this. And
Mhm.
he says,
Mhm.
well, you're a good officer. You got the skills and qualities. These were the things that were on my, when on my written part of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I told him that, let me just get back to you on that, because I was waiting to see what the lottery results were in the newspaper.
Mhm.
And back then, if your number was one, you were off to
Mhm.
go. If it was down to like 300 or something like that, hey, you weren't going anywhere. You won the lottery.
Mhm.
Suffice it to say, I won the lottery, and I told him, no, thank you. And that was my lesson about the convenience of the government.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. So fast forward then, and when you finish college, uh, presume start your professional career, but you also decide that you've looked at the food chain and the adoption, probably not only there, but you look at the arrangements, probably concerning us across the board, because what you described as the food chain in adoption exists everywhere else, in housing, in finance, in healthcare, in job opportunity. I mean, that is the structure of the relationship that is oppressive and that works to demoralize or marginalize our people everywhere all the time. And as you said, double impact on people that are gay, uh, and um, and so how do you move from there to deciding that the right thing for you to do is to demonstrate, both awareness and capability by becoming an adoptive parent? I mean, was it just the fact that you wanted to be a dad? It seems to me that's part of it, but there's a bigger story in you wanting to say something to the world and setting the world straight. Am I over analyzing this?
Well, when it came down to it, the idea of being a dad wasn't on my radar at 22.
Hmm.
Even though my dad hinted at that. Of course when he did that, he's thinking I'm going to marry a woman and have children. And I looked at him like, Dad, didn't you get the memo? I'm gay. But when I was 45, I was ready to be a father.
Hmm.
And my father and I had long talks about that. And he like, welcome to my world.
Hmm.
And so my father was my biggest supporter of, so when it came to the whole process of adoption, because the adoption didn't start when my son came into my life, this process started years before that
Mm-hmm.
in terms of parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I just is a point where yes, I have the love in my heart, and for a child to love him and to raise him to be the best person he can be. So, and I already have cousins who have adopted children
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I I was doing it as a single parent. And so and the interesting thing about that was once Walter came into my life, I share this. I experienced my own particular brand of sexism in this regard. If you follow where I'm coming from right here.
Break it out. Break it down.
Okay. Now, I really know one example of that was uh, when he was a baby. Of course, everywhere I went, he went.
Mm-hmm.
I took him to a grocery store. I took him to a few other places, and of course, here's my son being all cute as he is, and he and the cashiers and stuff said they say, "Oh, you must be babysitting today,"
Yep.
and I said, "No," and it said he's nope, it's just him and me,
Mm-hmm.
and then they asked, "Well, where's his mother?"
Mm-hmm.
And you see now, if it were a woman, they never would have asked her that question
Mm-hmm.
because I've been a witness to it.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was a male, they asked me. And when my response, and I look at it today, is when I get that question, says, "You're looking at her."
Mm-hmm.
Because there's I say it's sexist because when people hear the word single parent, they think single mother,
Mm-hmm.
forgetting that there are single fathers out
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I had experienced.
Great. And so, next question. You have navigated that. How does your experience with your son show up in your books? Do you take observations from your own growing and your son's growing? And, it seems to me you almost have to, because the most fascinating thing in the world, from my point of view, is the opportunity you have to be a parent and a steward and responsible and accountable as a parent. So, in my view, everything you do has to be with that child in mind, those children in mind. How does that show up in your work?
Well, in my work, it shows up in terms of the things that happened, and this is going to be in another book. No, especially once your kid's there, and you are doing a crash course in on-the-job training of an infant,
Mm-hmm.
and hey, and then no, it is exhausting. Whoever said paternity leave was a walk in the park or maternity leave, if guys say that, I said, I side with the women, hands down.
Yep,
I've lived it.
it's work.
And it is work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the fact that, yeah, being a parent is the toughest job there is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it could be the most rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are no manuals, there are no handbooks, and yeah, I know you make a lot of mistakes along the way. Some things you wish you had known, and some things you would say that you wish you hadn't said, or things that happen. But it's an ongoing process, and it never stops. Now, when I've seen my son, as I said, now my son is straight. He talks about these girls, from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen what happened is no, he has no problem saying he has two dads.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also told me that, with his friends, he said, "Okay, I have two dads. You got a problem with that? And if you do, you're no friend of mine."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So he's
these are things I'm learning, and it's still an ongoing process.
mhm, that's great. That's great. Well, he's got principles, yeah, and the principle is about dignity and truth, and that's a wonderful thing. Well, WD, this has been a great conversation as always. Walk us through, we got a few minutes left. Let's walk us through the series of your books. 8 books now so far, 8?
This is number 7.
Number 7. So let's walk us through, the arc of these productions, because you said this is part of an ongoing series of is it the Edwards family? Or
It's the Christopher family.
Yeah. Walk us through the whole series and then let us know what's coming down the road again.
Okay. Well, the first book was Mark My Words, books 1, 2, and 3, and that centers on the linchpin character in this Edwards family, the self-made billionaire, Alan Beckley Christopher. So that book, takes us from the 1940s through the 1980s. So that's when we go back into the history of where this family started.
So is there a prototype for that person, or is that your imagination of what a person who would be a Black billionaire might have been or might have become? Because I don't know that there were any Black billionaires in the 30s.
Well, he would be a billionaire now, but
Okay.
then back in the 1960s, he became a self-made millionaire.
Okay.
So I think of when I think of Alan Beckley Christopher, I think of John H. Johnson, A.G. Gaston,
Okay.
H.G. Parks, and I think of my father and men of his generation, because I'm looking at my family and the kind of strength of character and drive that these men have is how I based my character of Alan Beckley Christopher.
Is your dad still around?
He passed away in 2012.
Okay. What did he do in the military? What did he do besides what was his role in the military?
He was in the aeromedical unit. So, the evacuation squadron, he was in the Air Force. And later with the Air National Guard, so that means he worked a lot with the flight nurses. And he was also a self-taught computer programmer. He was instrumental in implementing the current computer system that the Air National Guard uses today.
Wow. Okay.
So,
and when he retired from the military, what did he do?
He worked in like community action programs. It was an African American, I think, Chambers Institute. It used to be on Lake Street, and he also worked in the Field Regina Northbrook neighborhood as being on their board. So he was still active so far as after he retired, and he retired early.
Okay.
But also, getting back to my stories,
Yep.
the next one, now, Mark My Words, that takes place in Chicago. You Never Know introduces the Edwards branch of the Christopher family, which takes place in Minneapolis. So, and then we have Never Give Up, which is a family friend of the Edwards family, and that's a whodunit, which takes place again in Minneapolis. Now, these are all historical fiction. So you see the arcs of what the city was like and where they were from the 1940s up to wherever the present is. In the You Never Know, the present is 2012 with the bridge collapse. And with Never Give Up, it is with the when Obama's reelection.
Okay.
Then the next book is called The Right to Be, which was my first romance novel, which starts in the Bahamas and it ends in the Twin Cities about one of the children, Alan Beckley Christopher's grandchildren. And then we have To Thine Own Self, which takes place here. So those are The Right to Be and To Thine Own Self are full-on romance novels.
Awesome. How do people get your books? We got about 30 seconds.
Okay, you can get my books through my website, which is wfostergrahamauthor.com. You can get them through Amazon, through Barnes & Noble, and through the Minnesota Black Authors Expo website.
WD, always a pleasure. Great conversation, man. And if I don't see you before Christmas, happy Christmas to you. I'm sure I'll see you before that time, but greetings to you and your family and everybody that you love. And let's keep this ball rolling into next year.
Yes, looking forward to it.
All right, take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.